Hey guys, had some technical difficulty on the live cast last night. We still managed to get some of it done, but we had so many technical issues that I went ahead and just deleted the recorded version of it. There just wasn't anything that was worthy of posting up. But some of the discussion that took place, or we attempted to have, was with respect to this thing going on in North Korea. The Russians flying within 100 miles of our coast, potentially a North Korean sub off the coast of California, power outages in New York, San Diego, and LA. And it was really kind of wanting people's input on that, whether or not they thought it was an issue or a non-issue, and if they felt that it was of particular importance, what steps people are taking to mitigate those threats. Keeping in mind that, you know, this is a combatives channel, but a lot of what we discuss is in regards to personal security. As such, depending on your area of operations, you know, your environment, you're going to see different things as being potential threats than maybe I would. If you're in downtown New York City, you know, you have there are different elements of threats there than the type of threats that I would face living out in the country, where we actually have to pipe in sunshine. So what is it that you're preparing for? What is it that you're doing about these potential threats, if in the event you feel that that they are threats? I haven't spent a whole lot of time doing research, but I've recently, probably within the last week, kind of gone back and studied a little bit. You guys know that the perspective I'm coming from is a sovereign God situation, and while that does not absolve me of the responsibility of preparing, of taking steps, it also does keep me focused on the fact that what Jesus told his disciples in Luke was that they are to watch for his coming, not to watch for the end of the world. So primarily, I'm making sure that that I'm spirit-filled, that I'm staying in his word, that I'm doing what it is that he's called me to do. I'm not getting off focus. But by the same token, you know, just because we see disaster and turmoil and things like that coming does not necessarily mean that this is the end of the world. It might just be the end of the United States. I mean, if you wanted to look at it from that perspective, I think a lot of people have a United States-centric view of things, where if the U.S. fell, well, naturally, that must mean that the end of the world is here, and that may not be the case. We don't see the United States in biblical prophecy, so maybe there's a span of time after the United States falls that things continue to go bad. So, you know, depending on what perspective you're coming from, whether or not you're pre-trib or post-trib or mid-trib or whatever, you guys who don't really follow biblical prophecy probably don't understand, and but you guys who do, you know what I'm referring to. Depending on what perspective you're coming from as far as you know, the end of the world, you may or may not be just assuming that because the United States falls as a superpower, that that this is necessarily the end of the world as we know it. It may not be. It may just be the end of the United States. So, I mean, Rome fell and the world kept going. And, you know, Germany at one time was considered a superpower and fell, and the world kept going. I'm by no means telling you to take your eyes off the ball, but what I am saying is that we need to keep focused on what it is that's important, and not just go sit up on a mountaintop somewhere, you know, just waiting for the end to come. So certainly take steps to mitigate threats as you see those threats, you know, in your particular area of operations, in your particular environment. Take steps to mitigate those threats as you see it, and you know, get up off your butt. If you see you have a weakness, train it until it becomes a strength. And that's a truism, whether or not we're talking about combatives or whether or not we're talking about preparedness, general security, force protection, anything. If it is a weakness, you train it until it becomes a strength. And if you see a particular weakness or a vulnerability in food storage or water storage or medications or things like that, and you see that as being a real possibility, that those things become a need, then you mitigate those threats. All right. Remember, combat is combat is combat. It's the same principles apply to preparedness as those that apply to general security and those that apply to you know, combatives. So, you know, we work on those weaknesses until they become strengths, and then what that entail creates is a new set of weaknesses, because now those things that were weak are now your strengths. So now something else is weak, so now you train those, and it becomes a never-ending cycle to constantly build on those things, not neglecting, you know, our spiritual focus and keeping Christ at the center of all that we do. I know this is getting a little bit theological for some of you guys, and maybe that's not your perspective, but remember, that is essentially a potential weakness for you. So not just taking the approach rather that it's not important is no different than you taking the approach that it's not important to train grappling, or that it's not important to train gun skills or knife skills or anything else. You know, do you think or do you know? Do you know that's a weakness? Do you know it's a strength? You know, do you know it's a non-issue? I would highly suggest that you investigate until you know. So anyway, you guys go ahead and comment. I'd be interested to find out, you know, what everybody's perspective is on this North Korean thing, and whether or not you think those power outages that occurred in 3 major population centers on the same day, roughly at the same time, was a drill, or whether or not you think it was a potential probe from an enemy attack, or what. You know, does it tie into the Russians probing our borders up in Alaska, or does it tie into the potential North Korean sub and the sub hunting that's going on off the coast of Alaska? I'd be interested in find out what people think about that. So, all right, you guys train hard.